All right, welcome back to We Are Not That Simple podcast. It's been several months since I've recorded an episode, but we are back. Again, this is called We Are Not That Simple. It's brought to you by Grace and Garfield Christian Reformed Church and Animated Concepts. Today we have William with us. William's a longtime West Sider.
21 years.
21 years. And so we're just going to jump right in. Born in Chicago?
Yeah, born in Rogers Park.
Okay.
Lived there till I was about 17, then moved to Wicker Park.
All right.
And then I moved over here to East Garfield Park in February of 2002.
Okay. So February 2002. So let's say before 2002, you were in Wicker Park, right?
I was there from 1986 till 2002.
So what was your mentality of Garfield Park prior to moving here?
A bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
Underserved, gang-infested, heroin.
Well, now, just to give some perspective there,
Yeah.
prior to 2002, Wicker Park wasn't exactly...
No. When I
greatest
lived
neighborhood
over
in
there, it was North Avenue from Western down to the Home Depot that's there now was prostitutes 24/7.
Yeah.
The corners of North Damon, Milwaukee, there was a Polish restaurant, Lubinski's Polish furniture store, the Double Door, which was actually a liquor store when I lived there.
Okay.
And then the Main Street pub was attached to it, and that was a hillbilly bar with a huge shrine to Elvis Presley, a Confederate flag. There was the heroin bar across the street. The bank was closed,
Yeah.
which is now a Walgreens.
Because that's tricky, because when people hear Wicker Park, it's like, oh, you're from one of those uppity neighborhoods. It's like, no, that's not what Wicker Park was at that time.
Yeah, my dad was born at 2019 North Avenue in 1924 in the building.
Oh, wow.
He grew up over there. My grandmother lived at 2157 Lemoyne.
Okay.
Great-grandparents, 1430 North Maplewood.
Oh, so you come back generations to Chicago.
Yeah. So it was a different neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then as like Lincoln Park, Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
Then as they were getting chased out of Lincoln Park, they started moving west.
Yep.
Wicker Park, Humboldt Park.
Yeah.
And
I
there you
worked
go.
for an organization, Puerto Rican Cultural Center, the Segundo Ruiz Belvis Cultural
That
Center.
used to be down the street from me. It's the 1600 block of
and
North
now
Claremont.
it's in Hermosa.
Yeah, so everything changes. But no, it wasn't a good neighborhood. Most new buildings on North Avenue were vacant lots when I lived over there.
So if you were to compare, let's say, rough neighborhood being 1, Gold Coast being 10, what would you have rated Wicker Park then? And then what would you have rated Garfield Park then?
Probably a 5.
So Wicker Park a 5.
Yeah, and then Garfield Park a 3.
A 3. Okay.
Yeah. You know, it was actually when I first moved over here, it was more desolate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense. Like on my street, I'm on Washington, there was only like 5 cars parked on the entire block. Which when I moved to Wicker Park, there was only 5 cars on the block.
Yeah.
But when I left in 2002, I was normally having to park my car 2 blocks away from my house.
Yeah.
And now on Washington, over the last 5 years, it's filled all the way to Holman.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember 2002, I would have been just starting out as a musician in Wicker, going to a lot of the open mics in Wicker Park, which were just starting to pop up.
Yep.
At that point, and then, it was interesting for me because at that time I would have been in Humboldt Park still, and I probably would have given a similar ratings, maybe a 4 at Humboldt at the time.
Yeah.
And then Garfield Park probably a 2 or 3.
I think Wicker Park to me, because it never fully went Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not bashing Hispanics.
It was very much a pass through for the Puerto Ricans.
Yeah.
Wicker Park on the way to Humboldt.
There was enough white people that still remained in Bucktown, Wicker Park.
Yeah.
And at that time, most of the white people were, I don't want to say lower white class white people.
It's funny you say that because my grandmother lived in Bucktown, on Charleston, just a couple blocks from Holstein Park.
Yeah.
And there was, we would go there all the time, play out in front, and there was a house maybe 5 doors down from her with some white kids that we would call the dirty kids.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Us Puerto Rican kids calling the white kids the dirty kids.
Yeah, there were a lot of lower white middle class people, I guess, over there. So, and to me, it started to change like 1990.
Okay.
91. The artists had already been over there for maybe 5-6 years. They had that around the Coyote. That was
Was it
like
in Bucktown?
yeah, that was like the first art festival.
Oh, okay.
I believe the first year it was in the old Ludwig Drum Factory on Damon,
Yeah.
and then the next 2 years they moved it to the Northwest Tower, which I believe there was a gallery called Coyote in there, like one of
Okay.
those first art galleries.
Yeah.
And that's why they called it around the Coyote. And then after the second year, they started charging, and it used to be you would walk around within a 5-block radius, and the artists just had their doors open of their houses.
Yeah.
So you could just walk in, and whatever artwork the person did, it'd be on display. Then the fourth year, they consolidated it into like 2 locations. They charged $10 admittance.
Yeah.
I think they quit doing it. They might have done it one more time after that, and then they quit doing it. And the neighborhood started to change.
Yeah.
But to me, people will argue, I thought by 95 the neighborhood was well on its way to gentrification, but I read stories where people, the guy that opened the Violet Hour last month, I saw an article where he said in 2007, Wicker Park wasn't a neighborhood anybody wanted to open a business. You were more likely to get mugged.
Yeah. Well, and to a certain degree, Wicker Park still had some rougher elements to it at that time.
Little patches, maybe.
Yeah. It wasn't the Wicker Park we have now, and it wasn't the old school Wicker Park either.
Yeah.
It was still in transit.
I guess when the Starbucks opened,
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it is weird because people picture the areas. All they see is Wicker Park. It's similar with Logan Square.
Yeah. Urbis Orbis, for you old school people, the coffee house that then became and to tie in the Real World.
Okay.
Urbis Orbis closed, and then they held the Real World at the former Urbis Orbis coffee shop that was at North Avenue in Honore, I think.
Yeah. What year was that? Because that was a big launch of Wicker Park.
91, 92. I never watched the show, but it was around there.
I think it was later than that.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
I would have been too young in 91. And
Yeah.
I remember.
That, to me, was, I guess, the nail in the coffin, if you will, for the neighborhood.
That was a big
And the Wicker Park hot dog stand when that got shut down, which used to be in the Flatiron building.
Yeah.
Which, once again, the Flatiron building used to be true artists in there
Yeah.
and cheap rent.
Yeah, I remember going to a couple of events there.
Yes, yeah. So
early on. Yeah, and then I remember when I moved over here into Garfield from Humboldt, and I was starting teaching over at a school in Crane High School, and telling the students that I came from Humboldt Park. Because I was used to thinking Humboldt Park was a step above Garfield.
Yeah.
Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But all the kids seemed to think, no, Humboldt Park is that no man's land.
Yeah.
I
always tell this story. It was either 85, 86, or 87 in the lagoon in Humboldt Park. The first year, they found an arm. The second year, they found a torso. And the third year, they found a leg. But I always remember, because on the news, they would say, the police say the torso does not match the arm they found last summer. And then the third year, the police say the leg they found does not match the torso or the arm they found. Humboldt Park used to be worse, I think, than Garfield Park.
Yeah, but I always felt growing up, I grew up in Humboldt Park, so I was familiar. Didn't feel it was like Garfield, we don't go there.
Yeah.
We don't cross Chicago Avenue.
Yeah.
And apparently the people in Garfield thought the same thing about where we were from.
My mother used to bring us to the conservatory, which is what most people, even to this day, when you say Garfield Park, is the first thing.
The conservatory.
The conservatory, which there's so much more to the park than the conservatory.
Yeah. But, it is a beautiful park.
Yeah, underserved.
Yeah.
So
you came in 2002. My family moved over into Garfield about 5 years later, probably at the height of the bubble.
Yes, definitely there was a bubble about 2008. The neighborhood, when the economic downturn of the country, the neighborhood, in my opinion, took 2 huge steps backwards.
So now you coming in 2002, how would you describe the progression between 2002 and 2008?
Out of control real estate. Just keeping an eye on things. The condos across the street from me, I think in 2002, were still going for, it was a multi-unit building. I believe they were going for $50,000. And by 2007, they were up to $150,000, $170, $5,000. So in a what is that, a 3-year period to see that much of a jump. You had a couple articles. The Sun-Times, I believe, did one. I don't know if it was Newsweek, the next hot neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then you had the economic downturn and foreclosures and prices plummeted again.
Now, when you saw those changes, what did you notice demographically?
I noticed some of the people buying were evidently a little bit more white. They were white and Hispanic.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of people that I knew, a lot of Puerto Ricans. I mean, my sister bought, my brother bought, a lot of my friends had bought.
And even at those prices, were still cheaper than in
other
Wicker
areas,
Park, Logan Square, Lincoln Park,
Yeah, 'cause
any
those
other
prices
neighborhoods.
were way inflated.
Way
as well.
inflated, yeah. So they were reasonable compared to, I guess, what the prices should have been in these other neighborhoods.
What was the commercial feel like at that point, like the 2002 to 2007?
There was just the liquor store / grocery store at 135 North Kedzie.
Okay, yeah.
There used to be actually, we used to eat there all the time, Edna's.
Yeah, I remember hearing,
Edna's
I've never
had
been
great food. It was on the corner of Madison and Kedzie. I believe she had owned it for 30 years, maybe longer. She catered my son's baptism. Everybody was amazed at the food.
Yeah.
Just good food, good people. And then I think they went out of business maybe 2010.
Okay.
I don't remember. And then something else replaced it that wasn't that good. Lasted like a year, and now it's boarded up.
Okay. Yeah, and then I remember when I first moved on Walnut Street here, the Lakeside Bar.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was called. If it was
The
still
Boss Man.
The Boss Man. And
Boss Man.
Every weekend it was live blues music.
Yes, yeah. That was here too. We'd come over and see the blues. Okay, so the liquor store. Evidently, the car wash, I think, might have still been here down the street. I can't really think of too many other businesses in the 6 to 7 block radius over here that was actually here.
Okay.
A dry cleaner too.
Okay.
And Rothschild's Liquor, which I believe is still standing over
Yeah.
on Madison and Whipple.
Yeah.
But that was about it. 4 businesses.
Yeah.
And you'd have to go to the other side of the park for any, I guess, more retail.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how long that there hasn't been a whole lot over here. I mean, you had the Lakeside Bar, which was a blues bar, which was cool. It's still a bar.
Yeah.
Not nearly as cool.
Well, I guess from being from Chicago, no family restaurants outside of Edna's, which closed down.
Yeah.
And that was one choice, though, where usually most neighborhoods you have other choices.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a food desert in the sense of restaurant-wise.
Yeah.
And it still is to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the Inspiration Cafe, I believe, which is still a couple doors down.
Yeah.
They're more, I guess, on the higher side of what this neighborhood might expect to pay.
Yeah.
There's not even really any fast food. The closest fast food would be
Western.
Madison and Western,
Yeah.
the McDonald's.
Yeah.
You know.
Or about a similar distance, you got Burger King over by Orr.
Yeah.
Popeyes on Kedzie in Chicago.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to go up into Humboldt or
Yep. Yeah.
near West Side. That's interesting. So now you have that progression of real estate growth between 2002 2008-ish without really any commercial development during that time.
Yeah.
Okay, then you have 2008, everything crashes. We go back, almost back in time. Now, that was, 15 years ago now.
Yep.
So since then, and let's put another marker at 2020 because
COVID.
to a certain degree we went back in time again.
Sure.
But up until 2020, between 2008 and 2020, what were some things that kind of differences that you saw or progressions patterns within the neighborhood?
The hatchery probably would be the biggest thing. The food incubator at Lake and Kedzie. The CVS went in. That was before the COVID pandemic, though, I believe by maybe 2 years.
That left, right? Because it had a very short run.
In a very short run, there was a drugstore pharmacy that was actually across the street in the building that Edna's was in, which shut down, and the current alderman approved the CVS, which lasted, I believe, maybe 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And then that was closed down, and I believe it's a Dollar General now.
Now, which alderman would that be for that? Because that's right. And Kedzie is one of
At the
four.
time, it was Jason Irvin.
Okay.
They changed the boundaries. The boundary used to go to Albany for the 28th
Yeah.
ward, and then they moved it back to Kedzie. So, like, now that might be in Burnett's ward,
Yeah,
the 27th.
okay. So
But
now
at that time,
it was Irvin's
it was
ward.
at the 28th. I believe, too, there used to be a mental health center.
Okay.
Maybe an outreach of Howard Brown, but I'm not 100%.
Okay.
Or no, not the Bobby Wright. That's what I think it was
Okay.
called. And the city shut that down, too. So, a double whammy.
Yeah, because I would say, let's say, the ones that I can think of in terms of businesses between when I came into the neighborhood in 2007 and now, and even when I moved in, I wasn't frequenting most of these places.
And Wallace's
yeah.
was open.
When did that shut down?
Once again, maybe 2018.
Okay. So there's a new owner now at Wallace's that has plans. I'm trying to get him.
Yeah, that seems to have been the last 3 to 4 years, though the restaurant allegedly was going to open.
Yeah.
There was talks of $100 million project that never materialized.
Yeah. You're talking about series.
Yes. I'm not a conspiracist, but there's something definitely going on because it's a no-brainer that eventually it will be.
Yeah. So before the pandemic, the guy that bought it, Wallace's,
Yeah.
He had all the plans together to do almost like a food court type
Okay.
thing there. Because I met with him to discuss some of those things, and he had a decent chunk of change raised for it. And this would have just been Wallace's, not
Yeah.
the whole stuff around it. But then the pandemic happens, that puts stuff on hold. I haven't followed up to see where that project is now.
And I think the New York First Something, it's right across the street.
Yeah.
I think they got like a $275,000 grant to open.
Yeah.
But they serve more like Italian beef.
Okay.
I guess fast food, but
Yeah.
nothing per se healthy. Something maybe.
Yeah. Which I'm not really interested in anything healthy.
Okay. yeah. Well, for the other families.
Yeah.
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 And the Pete's was a game changer,
Yeah.
which some people probably might not consider East Garfield Park, but
Which is tricky, right? Because I feel like when I first moved in, Garfield Park went over to Western. And so, sure, Pete's might be across the street, but
Yeah.
it's still right. Now, it's like Rockwell. It's what everybody can, at least in real estate. they'll
well,
say,
if you actually look at the city, it's Sacramento's where it really begins.
okay.
But I would agree with you on Western.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would say West Town, but past the
Yeah.
viaduct, you're in East Garfield
Well,
Park.
and then, like on Redfin, it would be called Near West Side.
Yeah. But the Pete's definitely was a game changer,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, for...
Because that opened up when I first started selling real estate.
Yeah.
This would have been 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at prices before Pete's opened up.
Yeah.
And you couldn't sell anything for $200,000.
Yeah.
The next year after it opened up, you had $500,000 homes going.
Yeah, behind it, there's condos going, 3-bedroom, 2
Yeah.
baths for $480.
Yeah.
New construction. They're putting a stop in at Lake and
Yeah.
Damon.
Now it's
Yeah.
huge there.
Huge, yeah.
It's
The
kind of
West
untouchable.
Loop booming is now up to Ogden, Union Park.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I remember going to Union Park, the bar there.
Yeah. Change is inevitable. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
They had
slow,
great
though.
lobster mac and cheese there. I was sad when they built condos there.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah, lobster mac and cheese gets you an idea of the kind of
Yeah.
cuisine I'm interested in.
There you go.
Okay, so that's so then now the changes between 2000 and 2002 2008. Would you consider those positive changes?
I think anything that goes up over here is positive.
Okay.
The neighborhood rock bottom way before I got here.
Yeah.
It's has the most vacant land of any ward in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why people would complain about seeing any type of new construction as opposed to a vacant lot, which the city owns most of them, FYI.
Yeah.
And they're not.
They have this initiative now where they're trying to sell many of them.
That's what they should have done in the first time around with the dollar lot program. They should have offered the lots first to anybody that lives on the block that is willing to build almost immediately. The example I would give on my block, we only had one vacant lot. The girl across the street got it. She bought her house like a decade ago, lived there for about 2 years. She still owns it, but she moved back to Ohio. And she got the lot at Washington and Kedzie. She's been trying to sell it now for the last 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, she actually called me to give an idea of what price. She didn't like the price that I gave her of what it could sell
I
at.
think they should have immediately given. I had filled out an application for it. I wanted to build a 3-flat with 1 unit to be affordable housing.
Yeah.
TODs, transit-oriented development.
Yeah.
No brainer over here.
Yeah.
I mean, within a 2-block radius of the Kedziel stop,
Yeah.
Central Park, California, nothing but vacant land.
Yeah.
So you could build, a good chunk of affordable housing and market rate condos.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the city.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people have gotten the lots, and some of them have done what they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Built a fence.
Yeah,
So-
that's
so-
all they've done, though.
yeah.
They've built a fence, and why do people think that's going to change the neighborhood?
Well, what it is they think, and this is the mentality I've come is like, I'm going to buy a lot, and I'm going to sit on it.
Yep.
And then these other people are buying lots they're actually going to build, and then mine will
yes,
be. And
yeah.
so everybody's waiting for somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
And then those are the lots that you can get. But what happened with a lot of the dollar lot stuff, it's like, because I applied for several of them, and then the alderman says, oh, not this one. We don't want to sell this one.
I've seen that too, where they say he's holding it back for developers. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But now with the second round they're doing here is what they should have done on the first one, where they're giving preference if you actually say, like, I got the loan ready,
Yeah.
I'm going to build immediately.
Yeah.
That's what they should have done on the first time around.
Now, the tricky part about that is if you're a savvy developer,
Yeah.
awesome. And actually, I not savvy developer, a loaded developer.
Yeah.
Because you can have the financing or all lined
Yeah.
up without ownership of the property.
Yeah.
If you're small-time developer, ragtag dude, well, how are you going to get approved for a loan on a property that you don't own?
Right,
You can get
right.
some kind of pre-approval,
Yeah.
but a lot of hard money lenders don't really operate that way. And so, because what'll happen, I'm going to buy this lot. What do you want to do? I want to build this. Send me your plans.
Yeah.
I'll send you my, rough designs or renderings. Well, what about blueprints? I'm not going to drop blueprints on the possibility
Yes, yeah,
that
yeah.
I don't have that kind of money. Well, then we'll find somebody who has that kind. Then you're going to be waiting another 10 years.
It'll be interesting to see because, right, they have the Garfield Greens. I think that's what they're calling it at across from Marshall.
Okay, that on Fifth Avenue one.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 42 affordable housing and 5,000 square feet of retail.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be a barometer of maybe the direction the neighborhood will be going once it's built.
Yeah.
To start feeling out, what's...
Because I've been hearing about that one a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, it's ready to go. It's ready to go.
It seems forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm still waiting. I mean, it was kind of like the hatchery. The hatchery they had been talking about for years.
Yeah.
I was excited when it finally came about because I'm like, man, I've been going to meetings about this thing.
And all right, back to the meetings, and then you would have like a lot of the locals, maybe some people that had moved over here in the last 5 years that were opposed to it because of the dreaded G word of gentrification.
Mm-hmm.
That's never materialized. It's been open now for 4 years, I
Yeah.
think.
And that's the silly thing is, I feel like a lot of the complainers, well, we don't want gentrification. Well, one, typically a lot of the complainers are the gentrifiers.
Yeah.
So it's like, are you for it or are you against it?
It's such a double-edged sword, though, because what is gentrification? So, like, I move in and I plant flowers and I keep up the paint on my house.
Yeah.
And when I first moved over here, I was putting flowers in a couple months after I moved over here. And the woman came across the street. She'd been over here since 1963. Mm-hmm. She asked if she could give me a hug, African-American woman, and said, I wish more people like you would move in over here. You just added $10,000 on to my property value.
Yeah.
So there's a double side of gentrification.
Yeah, and so certainly that's the purpose of the show, is that there's a lot of people with different opinions than the ones that get popularly expressed.
Yeah.
That you never hear from. I've had the same kinds of things expressed on my blog, but it's like we want things to come in,
Yeah.
but we don't want things to change. Well, you got to pick one.
You got to, yeah. And I don't want to see anybody forced out. I get when property values go up, as you're kind of seeing in Pilsen now,
Yeah.
that people complain that I have cheap property taxes.
Yeah, yeah.
That I get it. They start going up, and some people that are on fixed incomes.
Mm-hmm.
You do, if you're a senior, though, you get the senior break. I don't have all the answers, but that's up to the government then
Yeah.
to come up with a solution for that.
Well, to a certain degree, and maybe this is part of where I tend to diverge, and this is probably new on my part, is that I don't know that it is up to the government. Well, one, because the government just sucks at it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Every program that's been rolled out
Yeah.
has done poorly. I remember Micro Market Recovery Program, MMRP. They still exist. But when they first rolled out, this would have been like more than 10 years ago, they were giving like $35,000 in down payment assistance to nobody.
Yeah.
Because nobody could get through the program. It's like,
yeah.
oh, that's an awesome sounding program if you can get it done.
I would say, too, like an example I give is, let's just say you own a building and you've been renting to the same people maybe for 25 years. The neighborhood is changing.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, you can get more rent now. And you have grandchildren maybe that you want to pay their college for.
Yeah.
So are you supposed to keep the tenants that you've been getting $800 a month for the 2-bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
1-bath when you can rent it out for $1,600? Is that greed, or is it you're saving it because you want to help your grandchildren? Yeah. That's part of your retirement. Yeah. So there's
and the other aspect of it is because I feel like whose responsibility is it? Well, to a certain degree, part of it is that person on the fixed income.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't have other options. But who cares? I'm saying who cares about them, not in the sense of nobody, but who does? Like, where's their family? Where are their friends?
Yeah.
Where are the ones that are supposed to be looking out for them?
I'd like to believe that some landlords, like, I mean, I'm not per se a landlord, but if I was a landlord and the old woman, the old man had been living there for 20 years, I would probably let them stay to finish their their life out. As long as they're paying the rent, they've been good tenants, you know.
And that's your choice. But ideally, they would have somebody that can say, hey, you know, for example, I mean, and maybe this is just me wanting everybody to do what I do, which could be true. Like, I just renovated a building. My parents live in one of the apartments. Yeah. For free. Why? Because they're my parents. Because I love them. They took care of me. And now it's my turn to take care of them. Yeah. And do I have to do that? Maybe not. But do I really want to trust them to the government? Yeah. It's like I said, there's no easy answer to it. It's a very... Because I do feel like that's been a trajectory over like maybe the last 30 years of everything's commuter-centric. So who are your neighbors? Who are your family? I see a lot over here too recently, like on message boards where some people are like, if you're black and you do sell to a white person or an Hispanic person you're building, you're a traitor. Yeah. And I don't get that. You know, like if you're paying the fair market, you know, if you're asking X amount for your place and you need the money, you know what I mean? Like. And you know what? And what I would say to that is, I'm okay with you holding that perspective if you're going to live out that perspective. Yeah. The thing that drives me crazy is all the people that will complain while doing the same thing. Like, I've got this one white dude, I was telling him about something, he's like, well, isn't that kind of racist? Yeah. And I'm like, you're bringing more white people into the neighborhood. I'm like, you're in the neighborhood. You're white. Are you not contributing to the same thing? And I don't think you are, but by the very standard that you're suggesting, or, oh, there's all these white people buying up properties and just keep it. I'm like, but don't you own like multiple properties? I'll tell you too, my, once again, observation is the west side of the park is definitely going more Hispanic than it is white. And I would say East Garfield Park is almost 50-50 in the sense of white, Hispanic people. Moving on. I mean, there's other evidently ethnicities, Indian, you know what I mean? Yeah, because I have seen a lot of mixed race or mixed culture couples. I think it's like any neighborhood, if you're from Chicago, when you go to, I mean, part of the reason I bought over here is I wanted to live over here, but it's what I could afford. Yeah. It's you go where you can afford to live, you know? And you can go where it's affordable and you can get places. Yeah. Because you have the public transportation here. You have the 290. Yep. It's easy to get places from here. You can bike easily straight down Lake Street to get to the city. I mean, there's factors. I mean, I literally fell in love with the neighborhood, though. Yeah. I think the housing stock's phenomenal. The people are great. Yeah. It's some bad apples that bring the entire neighborhood down. Well, what's funny to me is that even those bad apples, or the ones that complain a lot, they're still pretty cool people. Like, I still enjoy like having drinks with them. And I enjoy talking to everybody. So you know. And that's what's kind of funny about it is because they annoy the crap out of me, especially at community meetings or online. Yeah. I mean, I'm not even on the community Facebook anymore because it annoys me. But, they'll be at the bar sometimes and we'll have drinks or whatever, and it's still a good time.
Yeah. Views. A lot of the people over here, we all have different views on the future of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I like it desolate, to be honest with you. There was a time when I moved over here, there was a year where the 111 store was shut down.
Yeah.
And then the gas station at Washington and Holman was shut down.
Yeah.
It was beautiful over here. I know it sounds so crazy to
especially
say.
where you're located.
Yeah. I was in between, but literally the bottles on the lawn disappeared overnight.
Yeah.
Nobody was. It was just desolate.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said about quietness.
Yeah. See, we had the reverse thing with the desolation. So during COVID, the bar was shut down, obviously. The grocery stores, all 3 grocery stores on this block were shut down. So there was like nothing there. And then all the drug dealers came over here to Lake and St. Louis and the partiers, and it became crazy.
Yeah. Well, once again, you could talk like I tell everyone, since you're from the city, there's no lights in the park.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lights on the drive, the inner drive, but the actual park, or any park in Chicago, the pathways are lit up.
Yeah.
It's pitch black in there. It's just so not inviting to go in there. And once again, everyone thinks the conservatory, but there's so much more. But I've noticed over the last year now they've repaved the pathways.
Yeah.
Allegedly, they're dropping $8 million into the park.
Yeah.
So we'll see, if that has anything to do.
It's going to be tricky because they have to deal with the crime.
Yeah, well, it's not just a crime. Another example would be like Humboldt Park. Since I was a kid, they've always done the buffalo statues, like on Sacramento. The garden, the pergola, I believe they're called. It always has been done. The first 2 years I moved over here, by ours, the city kept the flowers up. The lagoons, the water lily ponds were actually still working when I moved over here. But then they just quit doing the flowers, which is ironic because the conservatory's right there. Like, they don't have anybody in that conservatory that can, like, come out in fucking April and do the flowers.
Yeah.
And a side note to that, City Escape.
Oh, yeah.
City Escape's another business that went in. Connie's a nice woman. She gets probably $6 million in city contracts a year. I don't think a lot of people understand what the city of Chicago does. Like, those bulbs they place, they just tear them out. They usually throw them away. They used to give them away at the Garfield Park Conservatory.
Yeah, we got
First 3 or 4 years, you could just go over there. They had them out in the parking lot, like piles of them, and it was free. Bring your bags. Then they started putting them in bags and just giving them away. I don't think they even do it anymore. But my point is, it's like you can't take all these other flowers where you can't somehow tack on a couple extra flowers to these things, and then perennials. You know what I mean? That then come back every year and low maintenance. I think a couple years ago they did that along the Central Park. They have they're not tulips, the yellow flowers though that like March, April bloom.
Yeah, well, the perspective that I've started to come to, especially in the last year, is. I decorated my little traffic circle here.
I saw that. Very nice.
And so somebody commented, I posted a picture of it. Somebody commented, we've been trying to get the city to do some stuff along Central Park. And then also, I think it might have been Breakthrough that had decorated some of the trees along Walnut Street. But then spring came, and they never took down their decorations. And they ended up getting torn down and left as trash in the street. And it's one of those things where I responded to the guy. I'm like, you need to stop waiting for the city to do it.
And do it yourself.
Is it your community or is it the city's?
Yeah.
And that perspective for me has been quite different. I mean, along Walnut Street, we had a lot of issues, crazy parties and whatever.
Yeah.
I borrowed a crap ton of money, bought a bunch of the homes and renovated them.
Yeah.
There's not as many loud parties anymore.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of it is that it used to be, growing up at Humboldt Park, this is my neighborhood.
Yeah, I think you see it over here. I'm on like a old school Chicago. This neighborhood, a lot of people forget, was middle class black. A chunk of it too. Everyone has this idea of like low income people, sort of, but there were a lot of families. And mom and dad went to Westinghouse.
Yeah.
It was like a very, I'll say up until maybe the 60s, 70s. If some of these stories I see. And then, unfortunately, just generational poverty, a lot of these scattered site housing projects that came over.
I just wonder how much of it, because of the mentality is, well, somebody else ought to take care of it.
Yeah.
And that whole idea of, well, I'm going to take care of what I can has kind of diminished. Or I'm going to wait till I see other people doing it, and then I'll try to jump in.
I think, the city, if you're thinking the city's going to do anything, I think you're a little off.
Yeah.
You know. And the city, an example I would give, we'll see when they're done with it this time around, on Madison in between Washington, on Holman in between Washington and Madison.
Yeah.
It has been 20 years. They repaved it, I think, 3 to 4 times, and it buckles usually within a month or two.
Yeah.
Gets the wavies, and it's because of the old street car rails are still underneath the street, the metal. They never took them out across the city. So that's why with the heat, but it's like, who are you hiring? But you know what I mean? If you have your roof redone and 3 months later it's leaking, you're calling this guy up to say, fix my roof.
Yeah.
So once again, this is the city, like the alderman, the ward superintendent.
Yeah.
And this is where I believe there is definitely, like, if it was on the north side, you wouldn't see this. Mm-hmm. But on the west side, it's like, it's the west side. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, question, maybe this is going to get too controversial, but we're coming up to an election year.
I could talk all day. Yes.
Do you have any favorites, both for city or?
Well, so for the alderman's race, Irvin knocked everybody off the ballot again.
Is there nobody else?
No, he knocked everybody off the ballot again.
Oh, okay.
As maybe some people know, I ran for alderman over here. I'm a 3-time loser. I ran when I first moved over here when Ed Smith was still the alderman.
Oh, okay.
Mysteriously, some of my paperwork got misplaced. The second time, I actually had more of an A game, so I was actually on the ballot. 38 days after the election, the Sun-Times did an article where the current alderman forgot that he owned some buildings, and I guess on his economic disclosure form said he didn't own any buildings, and then he remembered after the fact.
Yeah.
And then
I feel like that's common these days.
Yeah, and then the third time, which would have been 2015, maybe 8 years ago, whatever that is, myself and the 4 other people got knocked off the ballot.
So for this time, what's her name was running? Beverly Miles.
She just got knocked off too. Yeah, Beverly Miles. Timothy Gladney was running.
Okay.
Sean Walker, who ran a couple times before. And there was, I believe, one other person.
And they all got knocked off.
Yeah, Beverly was the last one. I checked yesterday. She was knocked off.
Oh, okay. Wow.
They get you on the signatures.
Yeah, because I remember she had come to some people on my block to have to verify their signatures.
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand how it works here. You need 475 signatures. Mm-hmm. Rule of thumb is to get at least double. It's really triple that amount. Yeah. The laws are meant to keep the incumbent in office. Mm-hmm. So an example would be like the last time I ran and I was knocked off, they ruled that my own signature was a forgery. Now, I can fill out a legal affidavit saying that is my signature. Mm-hmm. I would have to knock on your door, though, and say, do you remember signing my petition? Yeah, I remember you. Yeah, you're a nice guy. Do you mind filling out this legal affidavit?
Because that's what Beverly Miles had to do.
Yeah. Why doesn't it fall on to the incumbent, though? Why doesn't Jason Irvin knock on your door and say, did you sign this guy's petition?
Yeah.
No. Do you mind filling out this legal affidavit?
Yeah.
There's not one law in the United States of America that says you have to sign your signature the same way. Mm-hmm. So now when you're at the Board of Elections and you argue that, they literally point to a sign. The first rule of the Board of Elections, they don't decide anything constitutional. Right?
Yeah.
So you can appeal. Rule number 4. The Board of Elections only hears so many appeals. Yeah. It's geared to keep the incumbent in office. So, the alderman, I don't understand. He can clearly see what's happening in this neighborhood. The current alderman is supporting Mayor Lightfoot, who I personally think is the worst mayor ever, who is also not from Chicago. Yeah. Not saying that's a requirement, but I do believe it is a requirement, at least for mayor. Like, how do you understand the problems, the issues that are going on?
Yeah.
If you're not. Her Southwest Invest was started under Rahm. Mm-hmm. Once again, it's piecemealed out, all this money. Yeah. Like the $50 million Right to Wellness Center that's going to be going in on the west side of the park. I don't want to be a naysayer, but these programs, Breakthrough, I believe they got $20 million to build their center. But nothing has changed over here.
Yeah.
you need to go big or go
Well,
home.
and that's the thing is that there are some things that have changed, but all that has been gentrification.
Right.
Like,
okay. Sure. Right.
Right around the Breakthrough Center.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of whites have moved in.
Yeah.
And a bunch of art galleries have come in.
Right. Yeah.
And those are cool. I applaud that, but that's not that's progress according to my definition.
Yeah.
But not according to a lot of their own definitions.
Yeah.
It's like you can't laud that and hate it at the same time.
Like, why isn't there an Old Navy on Madison and Pulaski? I mean, not to be funny, but the
I was
store.
like, Old Navy still exists?
I believe they do, but I meant it like in the sense
no, I
it's
know what you mean,
reasonable. Like jeans are $20, or why aren't there more businesses sort of like over there? That used to be the busiest business district outside of downtown.
Yeah.
And now if you look at Little Village, it's the second largest economic engine in the city of Chicago. So there's a lot of questions that could be asked.
Yeah.
And back to the mayor's race, right now I like Willie Wilson.
Yeah.
His heart's in the right place, I think. I don't know. Paul Vallis, I don't think Chicago's going to elect the white guy.
Yeah. Well, it's
Whatever,
funny
but-
with Willie Wilson. It's people will throw out anything they can to be against him.
Yeah.
Oh, he talks about God a lot. Well, if he believes it, why
Yeah.
can't he? I thought it was freedom. They're like, well, there's separation of church and state. That doesn't mean he can't believe in things.
Yeah.
But it's like I have to find something about him because
Yeah. Well,
because
people
he-
should look at their money first off because it says in God we trust. So
Yeah.
much for that
Well,
separation
it
of
just
church and
seems like
state.
I mean, like in the last election, you have an African American guy that has done well.
Yeah.
And that seems to love his city. And
Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about Willie Wilson, but it seems like we're looking for an excuse to get out of this black guy.
Yeah. I see that. I like him. It's kind of like he's not running, but Andrew Holmes.
Okay.
He's a community activist. Unfortunately, you always see him when someone's been murdered, and he's the guy on TV. Like, you all know what someone did this. His heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
I don't know if that will translate into being a good mayor.
Yeah.
Chuy Garcia, I got a little bit of a hard time with him. Only because, we ran for Congress. He got in after he won his election.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then
Like he doesn't have anything to lose.
Yeah, and Brandon Johnson, I don't like the way he talks, like an us against them.
Yeah. There had been talk about somebody throwing their name in at the last minute. Duncan. Arnie Duncan.
Oh, Arnie Duncan.
Yeah.
Now, see, I wouldn't go. He's a tool.
Well,
Yeah.
there's usually tools these days get elected.
Yeah. It is. It's like Obama. I mean, it's like the Clintons. They're never going back to Arkansas. FYI, Michelle and Barack are never coming back to Chicago.
Yeah.
They're happy on Martha's Vineyard. They're happy on the East Coast. I find that fake. I just find it, it's like the Clintons. Leaving Arkansas, and now they live in New York. They're never going back.
Yeah.
And it's...
Well, and as much as I agree with that, I do think it is fake. I just think that that's what Chicago politics has always been.
I would agree. I think most people, because so many people actually aren't from the city of Chicago anymore,
Yeah.
I think that's why Lori Lightfoot, and two at the time, why she got elected, I voted for her because, if you remember, it was, at least for me, the lesser of the two evils.
Yeah.
Tony
I know a lot of
Preckwinkle.
people that had that.
Yeah, she's part of the old school machine politics, which I guess some people call it. And I believe Lori Lightfoot on her reforms, but nothing materialized.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% investing in the South and West Sides, because they definitely have been neglected.
Yeah.
But once again, nothing's changed under her 3.5 years, 4 years almost.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, after the last election, I don't have much faith in.
It'll
voters.
probably be a runoff. I'm taking a guess here. It's still a little too early to tell because all it takes is one weird scandal, that soundbite,
Yeah.
something like that. I think two voters, though, you need to demand term limits.
Yeah.
You get Ed Burke. You get these guys that are in power for 30 to 40 years. It used to drive me nuts. That guy had like 6 round-the-clock bodyguards. We're paying for him. It's sergeant salary.
Yeah.
Like, who, the guy's worth $50 million.
Yeah.
And the city of Chicago just does, that's the Chicago way.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to vote these people out of office.
Yeah. Well, to a certain degree, and that's the other thing that is like, I don't feel like voting. I don't think the voters are going to do that.
I agree. Voters are stupid. I mean it. I'm not offending anybody, but
Yeah.
they believe the politician who comes out after 4 years and it's, hey, I'm sorry I wasn't listening to you.
Yeah.
I hear you now. You know, I'm gonna change. They get reelected.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, yeah, and I think it's one of those where most voters, and I think this to a certain degree, this a big part that contributed to this was the whole thing in the early 2000s, the voter, it became really cool to vote.
Yeah.
But all you have is a bunch of uneducated people voting.
Yeah.
At least uneducated in terms of the elections and the politics.
In certain wards, though, like our ward, I believe I could be off on this number, maybe 9 or 10 wards that the incumbent, knocked everybody off the ballot.
Yeah.
So they are running unopposed,
Mm-hmm.
which once again begs to ask, how are you a Democrat?
Yeah.
You don't believe in democracy.
No.
Don't even look me in the face and say you believe in. And I get why you do it, because you're guaranteed to win.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to go in front of people and lie to them
Yeah.
about what you plan on doing.
Yeah.
So we're stuck with that person now for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, no. It is, to a certain degree, I've kind of mentally given up on the whole political system.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what can I do in my community through private means?
I think you see more of that too across the city.
Yeah.
Organizations. First off, too, another thing is it's an outdated system having an alderman. The city of Chicago could get by with 5 aldermen, super aldermen, if you will, super wards, and to appease those that think that's crazy, 10.
Yeah.
But you don't need 50 aldermen anymore making $140,000 a year for what's considered a part-time job.
Yeah.
And then especially, like, you might say, like, Brendan Riley in the 42nd, where it's like low crime, restaurant shopping, but then you can now come to the 28th ward and parts of the 27th over here, and you're like, the bomb went off 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, and nothing's changed.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know how, as an alderman, you can let this continue.
Well, I think the biggest way that you do it, one, is you knock people off.
Yeah.
But you just take pictures of the new paved walkways in the park. Look what I did. Look how nice it is.
Yeah.
You just wait till it's cleaned up from all the poop from the crackheads.
Most people don't even know who their alderman is either.
Yeah.
They're not really involved in politics. I think every year it keeps, except for presidential elections, voting keeps going down, actually. Because younger kids they're just not involved. Like, maybe, I'm not saying you and I, but I was already always sort of politically, like, involved.
Yeah. Well, for me, I always grew up, like, when I was maybe before I was born, my father was pretty involved in the Democratic Party. And then,
Well, they used to run Chicago, but they took care of everybody.
Yeah.
Even the blacks, the Hispanics, because they used to have precinct captains.
Yeah.
So the precinct captain would be like someone like you, because you're very involved and you're,
Yeah.
within a couple blocks, that, like, is everything good? Do you need a garbage can?
Yeah.
Hey, the street light keeps going off. Like, they took care of that. Like the precinct captain. Then you report to the ward guy. Everybody was happy.
Yeah.
Some jobs were doled out.
But once I came around, my father switched to Republican because he had been involved in the Democratic Party so long. He's like, these guys really suck.
Yeah.
Well,
Side note to that, too. Chicago's been under Democratic rule for 80 years. And so when I see the mayor or anybody, like news columnists, and they write about this mysterious entity that has disinvested in the South and West Sides, what mysterious entity is it? It's the Democratic Party.
Well, and that's the thing. And so once my family was more Republican in its way of doing it, it's like, well, you can go out and vote, but it's not going to turn to anything.
Right.
And it's one of those where it's kind of a sad state. I know that there have been new Republican Party clubs developing throughout the city.
I don't think Chicago would. Maybe only because most Hispanics by the 3rd generation turn Republican. Mm-hmm. It's like any story. It's like immigrant Irish people.
Yeah.
They're Democrats, union people, but then their grandkids who have now gone off to college and they're making $150,000 a year, and they're like, "Where are my taxes going?"
Yeah.
But who knows? Chicago. Maybe one day we'll awaken.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I can pray about it, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I'm very curious to see what the next year holds, because it's like I always tell myself it's gotten so bad, but apparently it's not bad enough.
Well, if you look at the numbers too, so since the last census, the black population dropped by 200,000. Hispanics are the future of not just Chicago, of America. Mm-hmm. It's same thing. The last census is the first time whites dropped under 60% of the country. By 2050, they're supposed to be over half the population.
Yeah.
So the country, the cities are definitely, you're going to see I don't know if cultural change is the right word.
Although I am a bit skeptical about that, mainly because of the cross-cultural marriages. It's like, so for me, I'm pretty fair-skinned, but I'm Puerto Rican. My parents are both Puerto Rican. All four of my grandparents are Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thoroughbred Puerto Rican, but I'm light-skinned. But I married a Dutch woman.
Right.
Or a white woman, for racial speak. So my kids are half white, but they look white.
Yeah.
What if they marry? At what point are they no longer Latino?
Yeah. Well, you know, my family's been in America a long time. We consider ourselves American.
Well, yeah, and that's a tricky thing.
I mean, I'm of Irish-German descent, but when people ask me, I'm like an American. You know, mom and dad were born in Chicago.
Yeah.
Their parents were born in Chicago.
Yeah.
Their parents, you know what I mean?
And that's the thing is the term white seems to shift.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, Italians weren't white. For
Yeah.
a long time, we didn't want to talk about the Irish.
Yeah, right.
They were like whiter than white
Yeah.
appearance-wise, but they weren't one of the.
Well, they were considered the bottom of the barrel. You know, no Irish need apply.
Similar with Jewish people.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it's constantly shifting. That I do wonder in 10 years, well, who's going to be identifying as white?
Yeah.
Like, because
the high school on the South Side is a great example to watch right now if you're following this. The Asian American community wants pretty much a Asian American high school that'll predominantly teach Mandarin, and you know, because it's in where they want the site is the former public housing site.
Okay,
it's kind of turned into black versus, they're saying white, but it's actually the Asians, the Chinese, because Chinatown wants their own high school is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because they, like NPR and some of the other media is like white against black.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's the yellow people, the Chinese. You know, I would never say yellow, but I'm just saying if you're doing colors, it's not the white people. It's the Chinese people want their own high school.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And it is interesting because it's like there are so many of those ways of thinking that are like, well, you know, diversity is king.
Yeah.
Well, how about like a Mexican neighborhood or black neighborhood? Is there something wrong there? Oh, no. We should leave those.
Well, you never hear like Little Village. I always bring this up. How come they never complain about segregation?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's like we want everything to be integrated.
Yeah.
Well, except for those other cultural neighborhoods. And I'm like, to a certain degree, I'm not for segregation, nor necessarily am I for forced integration. I'm like, but if you're going to proclaim integration, you have to be consistent.
Well, not only that, there's self-segregation.
Yeah.
America and almost anywhere in the world, the Italians live with the Italians, the Polish with the Polish, the Irish with the Irish. And then the flip side of that is if something is segregated, let's just say this entire neighborhood's Irish, and we're saying, oh, it's segregated. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't we be asking, like, we'd like to see some Puerto Ricans move in, we'd like to see the Chinese move in.
Yeah.
So when you don't see that, in my own belief, you believe in segregation then. Mm-hmm. If you're not asking for change, I don't complain about it then.
Yeah. And there's you know, I went to a community meeting maybe 10 years ago now, where they were asking different people from different communities like what their thoughts are, especially for people who have left one community for another. And so for me, I was invited because I grew up in Puerto Rican Humboldt Park and moved to African American Garfield Park. And I was like, well, the thing that disturbed me a lot is a lot of the teachers were saying to the kids, go to college away.
Yeah.
Go to college away. And it was almost this treatment as if my community and my family is toxic.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, that's weird. And at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, we should protect the communities. And I'm like, but don't you want diversity? Yeah. And they didn't know what to do with that. And to a certain degree, I don't know what to do with that either because it's a complex...
I tell this story to a lot of people. Yeah. So they had that Kedzie Corridor project. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember this. Yeah. They were going to... $5 million, maybe $10 million between Lake Street and the Eisenhower on Kedzie. They had a meeting at Marshall High School. Mm-hmm. I'd say there were about 50 people there. I went there. Maybe 7 other white people were there. Yeah. The alderman, Irvin, was there. So they started off the meeting. Rahm was the mayor at the time. Yep. So a lot of the longtime residents that were there, when the alderman, as he was walking up to the podium, they were like, "Oh, look, the Jew mayor sent his puppet down to sell us
Yeah, yeah.
out. Jew mayor, Jew this. The alderman goes, hey, just listen to what the man has to say that the mayor said. I'd like to introduce Tony Goldberg. Everybody started screaming out, oh, so the Jew mayor sent the other Jew down to sell us out. They went around where people were introducing themselves, where they live. I'm not making any of this up either. The people over there will tell you this. They got to one of the last persons, who was this Chinese woman, spoke very broken English, and says, I'm here to buy up land. That's what she said.
Yeah.
They canceled the project.
Yeah.
They literally canceled the project. But I guess what I'm saying is that's racism. And John Perryman was there, who lives in the neighborhood. I mean, he actually stood up and was like, this is obscene that you keep yelling out Jew, Jew. You don't like it? Fucking leave. Mm-hmm. But could you imagine flipped around, though, the other way? That's what I'm just saying.
No, and that's the thing is the inconsistency of beliefs, which I think is... And so certainly, I'm obviously I'm a pastor of this church.
Yeah.
It's this idea that everything that I do has to be consistent with my belief system.
Yeah.
Like, if I say I believe in God, then that has implications.
Yeah.
If I say I'm a pastor, that has certain implications for how I'm supposed to behave, how I'm supposed to treat my kids, what kind of policies I can support, or because it has to remain consistent. And I feel like there is so much just blatant inconsistency.
Redlining. They talk about, you hear that all the time. Redlining affected the Jews, the Italians too. If you understand the full system of yellow, blue coding, is there racism in the country? Of course.
Yeah.
Who's denying that? I guess what I'm saying is I have a hard time, if you want to dwell on the past, we're never going to move forward.
Yeah.
Terrible things have happened in this country, and blame on both sides. Okay, how do we solve the problem? At least that's what I'm about.
Yeah.
Like, what's it going to take for us to move forward?
Yeah, and it's one of those things like, okay, if we want to move forward, because what I'm sure the pushback would be, well, you have to know what happened in order to move forward. You have to learn from the mistakes of the past. True, I'm all about that, but we're learning principles from the past that we have to remain consistent with.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, this failed. Okay, well then let's not do that again.
Yeah.
Well, what was the underlying principle that failed?
Yeah. That's how I feel about the school system here. It's a failed system, CPS.
Yeah.
Schools should go year round. Right? Everyone gets a summer off. Murders go up. They forget. Kids, we both have children. They're way smarter, just because of phones and such than we were, per se. It's just a different time. You need to adapt to that.
Yeah.
A lot of people forget the school system in America was just to teach the reading, writing, arithmetic, your most basic education.
Yeah.
And then if you had some money where, it was like a privilege then to go on to college.
Yeah. Well, but what people will point to, failed school system. What are you talking about? Look at Lane Tech. Look at Whitney Young. Look at Northside. Look at Walter Payton. Like, we have a lot of success. Yeah, there's some downsides too, but we're doing these, and that's
the city's sort of caught up. They got Westinghouse.
Yeah.
Selective enrollment. My son just graduated. Go Warriors.
Okay.
But I mean, I guess the city addressed the problem, at least over here.
Yeah.
They built a selective enrollment school. Once again, people forget how the city works, civics classes.
Yeah.
You levy a tax. You collect this money. You're supposed to spread that wealth around. So when you're looking in these neighborhoods and they're neglected, you need to point down to that 5th floor at City Hall.
Yeah.
So that's, at least in my eyes, where the problems are.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a philosopher named Rene Girard.
Yeah.
Or his big thing, or his contribution, was the idea of the scapegoat and the power that the scapegoat has. Let's blame the guy downtown. Yeah. But you know what he's doing? He's blaming somebody else.
Somebody else, yeah.
And how do you get away from that blame game? And to a certain degree, I'm of the mind you have to go back to, I have to do what I got to do. Yeah. And to a certain degree, I do take pride in my church denomination.
Yeah.
One of the big first principles is this idea of total depravity, is that everybody has that potential for being completely corrupted.
Yeah.
And if I want things to be better, I have to really start looking at internal sanctification, transformation. What am I doing with me? What am I doing with my household? What am I doing with my block?
Yeah.
And kind of branch out from
it's
there.
like you're saying, basically, responsibility. which nobody likes to say that word.
You know why? You know why?
Why?
Because it reminds people of the other R word that is. I actually, when I interviewed Danielle Tate,
Yeah.
I was like, she said the same thing. It's about personal responsibility.
Yes, yeah.
I'm like, you're sounding like a Republican, Danielle.
Yes, yeah. Well, it is. You make choices in life, and
Yeah.
I did not lead a moral life myself. I, was involved in illegal activities in my youth. Was arrested numerous times, but I made those choices.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying we used to say, "It's a cold game, but it's fair."
Yeah.
You choose to be whatever you do. Whether it be crime, you want to be an auto mechanic.
Yeah.
You're choosing that life. So you have, but you don't ever hear that anymore. It's more of a blame game, or what you said, a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. And there's power in that. People unite around the blame game.
Yeah.
That's actually a very powerful unifier, and I think people take that for granted.
Yeah.
It's like, because once you start thinking through that, it's like, no, there actually is enough blame to go around.
Yeah.
But it's so powerful to have that one person that we can just let out all of our passion and hatred for. And so we'll see. And that's when Lightfoot got elected. People ask me, well, what do you think? You think she's going to do a good job? And I was like, no. It's like, oh, you don't like her? I'm like, no, I don't think anybody's going to do a good job.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants that person to do everything. And really, whoever takes over the mayor can't do... They're going to be hated no matter what. Now, I do think that she's done a terrible job.
Yeah.
But I think she's going to... Even if she did a good job, which I don't think she did, she was going to be hated anyway.
Yeah, I believed in her. I really did. I really thought she would kind of, be who she said she was going to be, and that didn't materialize.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to Willie Wilson. I think his heart's in the right place, and I think if he became mayor, I think he would be calling out some of the injustice. When I say injustice, you have to address everything, and a lot of it's very politically incorrect.
Yeah.
The out of wedlock for blacks in America now is 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
In the 70s, it was 2 out of every 10 children.
Yeah.
You need to address that.
Well, the problem, though, is with that, the big problem is that that's where the culture is drifting.
Yeah.
Because, sure, right now it's a big problem amongst black and brown.
Yeah.
But whites are moving in that direction. And it's not doing them any good either.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it would force them to have to take responsibility for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And their actions. But to a certain degree, and what I've done a lot of work both on the west side and in the suburbs. Suburban communities have enough money to hide the consequences of when they screw up.
Yeah.
So, you have a fatherless home on the west side. There's some real difficulties that come out of that.
Yeah.
Well, if you're in Barrington and the father runs away, well, I still got my dad and my mom, and they'll probably just keep it hush and I can't tell anybody. And I'll probably resent them and hate them, but they're okay with me hating them as long as I don't embarrass them.
Yeah.
But the consequences don't hit the same way of the same thing. And there's still a lot of people that do have money that want to continue living that lifestyle.
Yeah.
That are unwilling to face how that lifestyle affects this neighborhood.
Right. I grew up a single mother, family and stuff. And like I said, I was a juvenile delinquent. The people in the neighborhood tried to have me declared a ward of the state to be sent away for a little bit. And I grew up in a fairly, like I said, Rogers Park.
Yeah.
It's diverse, but I mean, it wasn't, people don't like crime and they don't like troublemakers.
Yeah.
That's just the beginning of it, know.
Well, and that's the thing is that has always been a thing, and it still is a thing, just not publicly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the really tricky things is, you can talk to people and they have an opinion, but
there's the old saying though, everybody can have their own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. Mm-hmm. And here's a word you don't hear it anymore. Big data. Remember that from 8 years ago, and that didn't. It's almost like the systematic racism, which now is you don't even hear that. These key words.
Yeah.
The Me Too moment. America just forgets.
Yeah.
It's
well, and that's becoming a bigger issue in terms of they're forgetting faster and faster.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think part of that is because of the attention aspect is we're looking at too many things out there.
Yeah. It's become definitely a more complicated world.
Yeah. Well, and that's there's one of my favorite movies, which is controversial to have, Man of Steel, the Zack Snyder Superman movie.
Yes.
But there's a scene in it where Superman is a kid and he's first developing X-ray
Yeah.
vision, and it's freaking him out.
Yeah.
And he tells his mom when he's hiding in the closet, the world's too big. And she says, just focus on my voice. Make
Yeah.
your world smaller.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that I teach as a pastor. That's a big thing I've been trying to focus on my whole life is, yeah, I have opinions about Biden. I have opinions about Trump. But at the end of the day, what I know of each of those guys is going to be a lot more limited than the information I have about my son.
Yeah.
And even about my next door neighbor.
Yeah.
And and the amount of influence I can have over that entity, the president, the Senate, the Congress, the amount of influence I can have is a lot more limited than what I can have in my house.
Yeah.
And what I can have on my block. And so how do we encourage people to make their worlds small? Do you care about Garfield Park? Okay, we'll stop caring about as much what's happening in D.C.
Right.
Worry about, let's put our energy into what we really say we care about.
I think once again too, a lot of people just think like, there's already a group that's worrying about that,
Yeah.
so I don't have to worry about it. It
Well,
is.
There's already a group, and when I see that doing
Yeah.
something, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've been working at this stuff in the neighborhood for so long. I run into that, hey, I appreciate the work you're doing. Hey, you want to get involved? Well, I'm not ready right now. I don't have anything to contribute. I don't,
I'm not patting myself on the back, but for the last 10 years, I'm pretty involved in community cleanups. I never see anybody that's any of these boards. I'm not knocking you either. I'm not here to judge. But it's like you sit on these, these message boards, social media, but I never see you at any of these meetings or cleanups.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think something's going to change? Like, the genie's going to blink her eyes and that's it,
Well, and that's the other challenge of it is there's so many of these community meetings and different things to be involved in when I talk about this from the church perspective, when I first moved over here, all the Christians in the neighborhood, I know them, or at least most of them.
Yeah.
Do I do anything with them? No, because they go to a different church or they're involved in this other ministry. And there's these different churches, there's the different ministries, and they're all doing their own thing. And then when they're like, yeah, let's all do something together, while each one is fighting over what thing we're going to address together because they're each kind of vying for their own.
Well, too, like you can relate to this. Chicago used to be definitely more church neighborhood centered, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the right word to use. Where unfortunately religion has fallen out of favor. I'm Catholic. When I first moved over here, I started going to Our Lady of Sorrows on Jackson for Mass. 20 people. This is a basilica.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building.
Yeah, and my family is originally from the West Side a long time ago, and they would be like, there used to be 3 masses, you know what I mean? On 1,000 people each mass, 20, 25 people now.
Yeah.
So it's, and even in the Baptist churches over here, I don't think religion in the black community is as strong as it used to be either.
I think, it's hard to see because...
I'm not saying they're not religious, but I meant about going to church.
The religious practices versus religious beliefs.
Yeah, and even in Hispanic neighborhoods, like St. Adalbert's, as they're closing it down, you're just seeing, I hate to say the word future, just God is not in vogue anymore. You know what I mean? Like, because if you can't see it, it must not be real.
It's funny that you say that because, like, somebody had talked about Willie Wilson, and they're like, yeah, we just don't want God. I'm an atheist. I don't think God should be involved. And it's just like, what good has ever come out of that?
Right, yeah.
Sure, has there been problems in religion? Have religious people done awful things?
Yes, yeah.
Sure, but so have non-religious people.
Yeah.
But without having something... how do you say, something unifying that surpasses human existence.
Yeah.
What holds us together?
Right, yeah.
Outside of that, and to a certain degree, I feel like because I'm a Protestant, a Reformed in a Reformed church, and for a long time, and I wasn't always in a Reformed church, but I've always been Protestant, and for a long time, it was always like those Catholics.
Yeah.
Those are the other. And it took me kind of working at a Catholic school to be like, actually, we have a lot more in common in terms of our belief system than we have differences. And I used to, talk with the priests regularly. We have great conversations. And it's just like, because having that God is super important.
Yeah. Well, if you look, it's like once again as a Catholic, I maybe I'm more educated. The popes used to like sleep with women, believed in jewelry and money.
Yeah.
I could talk all day about it. I guess true Catholicism it's the golden rule. Do unto yourself as you would have someone do unto you. Help your neighbor out.
That's the Christian perspective, right? But one of the things that has happened, especially over the past few decades, I think with a lot of like the evangelical movement, is belief in Christian belief, whether it be Catholic or Protestant or Orthodox, became superior than Christian practice.
Sure.
And so you're kind of a scumbag, and you're sleeping with a bunch of women that aren't your wife, and you're not taking care of your kids. But I believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, well then that's okay. And it's just like no, the what's really important is the practice. And you want to have the belief too, but they have to kind of work together.
I look at it too as I always use this example is if you know your history is Lutheranism. Mm-hmm. Lutheranism is actually almost a pure form of Catholicism because Martin Luther said what I just said, like you guys, like the Pope, you guys are causing wars. Yeah. You're sleeping with women. You're influencing politics. Mm-hmm. He tacked his 97 Thesis on, and he was excommunicated. Yeah. But he spoke up, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's
and eventually, what did the Catholic Church do? They changed.
Yeah.
So, and I had this conversation with another Catholic friend of mine. It's
back to your Angelica. That's what Henry VIII, because they wouldn't give him a divorce, created his own church. Just saying.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where I feel like the Catholic Church needs the Protestant Church as somebody that's going to point out all your flaws so that they can improve. And likewise, the Protestant Church needs the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, that's our roots.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where we have to kind of be in it together because we all have the blind spots. And so to a certain degree, that's why I always tell people when it comes to like the ideas of diversity, sure, I'm all about diversity.
Yeah.
Because there's certain things that certain people, blind spots certain people groups have that other people groups can be very helpful with. But you're always going to have some element of self-segregation, which I think is okay. It's like a dance.
Yeah.
You need a lead and you need to follow.
I was thinking while you were saying this too, there's an old, like when you're in war, there are no atheists in a foxhole.
Yeah. There's, are you familiar with Regina Spektor?
Yes.
She has a great song, Nobody's Laughing at God. Yeah. And she has all these scenarios. Nobody's laughing at God in a war.
Yeah.
Nobody's laughing at God in the hospital. Yeah. Nobody's laughing at God when your kid hasn't come home. And
let's face it, everybody's been there like, God, please, if you get me through this.
When you're desperate enough.
Yes.
When the situation gets desperate enough, there's two ways that people will react.
Yeah.
One is the scapegoat and complete hatred.
Yeah.
And the other way is desperate calling out for the higher power to come intervene.
Save me.
And that's kind of the state of the human condition. And that's pretty universal part of the human, like all humans share that.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of the reason I have this whole channel is to get different people think all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
But
that goes, and to what you just said though, our society now has become where you can't talk freely anymore. If it's because, and it's both sides too. Don't get me wrong. Conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat.
Yeah.
You don't hear this term anymore. Middle of the road. You know what I mean? Or common ground.
Yeah.
When's the last time you heard common ground?
If I'm honest, I actually have very little value for middle of the road people.
Okay.
Because I feel like there's a lot fewer people that are in the middle of the road than they think. There's a lot of really radical people that think they're middle of the road and they're not.
Yeah.
But what I think is you can't say what you think anymore online.
Oh, you're right. You have the fear of losing your job
or
being ostracized, right?
But I have found that when I'm one-on-one with about anybody, I mean, to a certain degree, you mentioned John Perryman.
Yeah.
Me and John Perryman are on completely opposite sides of the ideological spectrum.
Yeah.
Like we probably disagree on so many foundational things. But he and I have gotten together for beers. We've been at your place, and we've gotten along. We've disagreed. We've, called each other names, most of the time in jest.
I left the East Garfield Park Facebook page because I posted that Chicago's been under Democratic rule for 80 years. Mm-hmm. I was called that was my right-wing salad by his wife who runs the page. Yeah. And I took offense to that, because it's a fact.
Yeah.
That's a fact, and that's
but
right wing.
If me and John Perryman only talked online,
Yeah.
we'd be complete enemies. But the
Agree,
fact that we can talk and have a drink in person,
Yeah.
I don't know that we'd call each other friends, but we definitely at least call each other neighbors.
I was gonna say I have a lot of people over at my house, and we talk political, and
Yeah.
we are on complete opposites. And it's gotten out of hand a couple times with some people.
Yeah.
But we're friends though, and that we can disagree to disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh,
And I know I'm right anyway.
It's like, let's just take another shot.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah.
All right, well, I think that's a positive note. Let's end on a positive note.
Let's do it. Yeah.
But thank you very much for coming.
No, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please please subscribe, because that's what everybody on YouTube is supposed to say. And let me know in the comments if you have suggestions for anybody else I should talk to. Thanks.
Giving in is simple.